Hi guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to have two Khamzat Chimaev gameplays. The first one will be in the top left corner as I go over some of my favourite top control positions and how I rate those positions. The second gameplay will just be gameplay exclusive where I talk about how I use Hamza and what you should look to do. So I'll timestamp that in the description in case you don't want to go over the graphs that I have which illustrate my favourite top control positions, as you'll see now on screen. But if you do want to stay and stick around to see how I break these down, and then there will be some Khamzat Chimaev gameplay in the top left that's been sped up just because it was a bit laggy. But the Robert Whittaker, the second gameplay, will just be gameplay. It will be no graphs, so I'll timestamp that in the description. So this is the top control positions ratings, and I was going to do this separate video, but on stream a couple people said just to include it in here, so I've decided to do that. So this is sort of a two-part video. And on the right hand side here of the graph you'll see there's the legend, so this is how I'm basing the scores that I'm giving. So how easy is the position to control is in light green on the graph, submissions available / submission strength is in light blue, how safe are you in that position is in yellow, and how easy it is to build GA. So the graph very clearly shows you how it's broken down with the colour scheme. It is labelled 1 to 5 across the left, but obviously you can't see that because the gameplay is blocking it. So that means that out of those questions, they're all rated out of 5. So 5 out of 5 being the highest, obviously 0 or 1 being the lowest. And then on the bottom is just another breakdown of it in a table form. So it might be slightly easier for some of you to just look at the numbers. And of course, one thing to note that this is just exclusively my opinion. It's not actually been research, or there isn't actually any game data. It's just from me playing what I think the most dominant top control positions are, and if I was taking an opponent to ground, where I would want to be and how easy it is to control the fight from that point of view. So this is just to help you that when you get on the ground, this is the position you should be going for, this position, and here's why. The only one that's a bit circumstantial is the submissions available and submission strength, because obviously that differs between fighters. For instance, the Hamza that I'm using now on the top left won't have certain submissions that a BJJ black belt will, like Charles Oliveira. So of course that's all up for debate. But if you want to look at all the stats individually, feel free to pause the video and have an actual breakdown, because I'm not going to read them all out because they're all on the screen. It's just my clear favourites are, of course, you're going to have half guard, which scored very high, top mount, side control, crucifix / side saddle, back sitting, and sprawl done relatively okay in terms of how easy the position is to control, the submission strengths, and how safe you are in that position. So how safe you are in that position is really, so for instance, can your opponent submit you, how easy is it to reverse you, how easy is it to end up on top, and by controlling the position I mean getting off deniers and just keeping your opponent on the mat for a long period of time. So like I said, the ones that I just listed out that were my favourites would probably be half guard, top mount, side control, crucifix / side saddle, and back sitting. And in a second it will switch to another graph which shows you the overall score, so you don't have to add it up yourself. You'll see just in a second here which ones I favour and why. And these are the positions I really believe you should be going for when you're taking your opponent down. It will be easier to control your opponent, easier to get a finish, and this is actually going to be on the bottom left, otherwise the gameplay you wouldn't be able to see it properly. So now predominantly you'll see the Khamzat gameplay, which is me fighting a created fighter. This game was extremely laggy, so hence why I've sped up the gameplay, so you're not watching just a very laggy match. But it's been extremely dominant match. I've just been taking my opponent down and using him how you'd use Hamza, just out there to destroy your opponent. But we'll get more into a Khamzat breakdown in the second part of this video here. But focusing specifically on the graph on the bottom left, you can see the highest overall score using those 4 points, the 4 questions that I was using in the previous graph, all rated out of 5, was back sitting. And back sitting is an extremely dominant position. It's one that is very easy to deny the transitions when you're there. You've got 2 very strong submissions available to you, which is the rear naked choke or the armbar, and from there you can wind into top mount, which got given a score of 17, which is very high. So for that reason, back sitting was listed as the extremely strong option. Obviously, you take your opponent to the cage, drag them down, you end up in back sitting, and for me, that's the most dominant, or one of the most dominant positions. And then you've got crucifix / side saddle, which that partnered with side control is my probably my top three. Of course, back sitting taking the first, but that position there, if you get your opponent there and you start denying the transitions, it's going to be almost impossible for you to get up. It doesn't matter how good your opponent is. Obviously, you could be facing an opponent that's a lot better than you, but if you get them in that position, they are going to struggle to get up, especially if you utilize everything well. It's very easy to deny the transitions. It's fairly easy to build GA. You just keep denying the transitions, you drain their stamina, and then from side control, obviously you can move into crucifix or side saddle, and from there the submissions obviously based on the fighters. But for instance, if you're in side control, my favourite submission is the Kimura, which transitions to the armbar. So if I'm there, I'll just deny, go for the Kimura. If I'm in crucifix or side control, side saddle, sorry. In side saddle, you've got the arm triangle, which is extremely powerful. And in crucifix, some people have the Americana, for instance, John Jones. Also an extremely powerful submission. Then a couple other things to mention. Obviously, you've got half guard here, which half guard's a very good position. It's a position I end up in most of the fights when I'm on the ground. I'd say it's quite easy of a position to control. However, your opponent's got more options of getting up. You're slightly under more pressure through your opponent. If they have the Kimura from there, you can get caught in a submission. The only submission you can get caught with from, I believe, side control, or from side control maybe, is the Darce choke. From half guard, you can also get caught in the twister. So that's why it's scored slightly lower than top mount and side control and crucifix / side saddle. Is just through the threats of the submissions. There is a bit more ways you can get caught. However, it is fairly easy to deny most of these submissions once you realise what they're going for. It's very easy to build GA. And obviously from there, you can end up in a position which I've rated stronger, which is top mount or side control. So half guard is very advantageous because you can end up in either or top mount or side control. And the lowest scoring was full guard and stack guard. You can control your opponents through full guard and stack guard. It's just submission threats are fairly low for yourself. It's going to be hard to submit your opponent unless you've got the leg locks. Also, you can end up in your opponent's rubber guard depending on who it is. If your opponent's got really good submissions, they can catch you in a submission. It's very easy to reverse you from there. And the list goes on and on and on. North-south, you're relatively safe. It's very hard to build GA. The submission strength, you have got a couple good submissions from there. Is it the windshield choke, maybe? Aljamain Sterling has it, and that is extremely, extremely powerful. However, compared to the other positions, I just don't see it as a position you want to be in on top. It's one of the ones you don't necessarily want to be in to dominate a fight. Sprawls are very advantageous as well. You can control your opponent from there with ease. You've got a lot of options for submissions. However, your opponent can just use it as an anti-grappling position, deny you fairly easily, and then either the referee will bring you back up, or you'll just get reversed. And then backside is okay. You can dominate from there, but it's fairly easy for your opponents to get out. Also, they've got there is a submission threat there. Also, back mount is dominant, but like I said, again, it's mainly how easy it is to get out. So the most advantageous positions I'd say are, of course, as you can see on the graph here, would be back sitting, crucifix / side saddle, side control, top mount, half guard, back mount, backside and north south just behind sprawl, and then the final two being full guard and stack guard. But yeah, so that's the more statistic heavy side of the video. Now here we're going into the actual Khamzat Chimaev breakdown of how I use him. Of course, you had the gameplay before, which gives you an indication of how I'm going to use him, and that is just to smash my opponent, to completely dominate. Not really looking for the submission finish, to be honest with you, unless I end up in a position where I can get it. Ideally, I'm just looking to destroy my opponent, get some good control time, and implement damage from ground and pound. And here we're coming up against Rob Whittaker, who is by far the best fighter at middleweight. I don't even think it's close. I know some people may argue that Izzy's good, but the overall complete MMA side of it, Rob Whittaker's got amazing stand-up, amazing in the clinch, amazing wrestling, good submission. So he's just such a threat, and the hands on him, my god, so much power. But as you can see here, we finally get the takedown. Had the first attempt denied, which was the turning takedown. And one thing to note is, when you go for a turning takedown, if your opponent denies it, when you then go for another takedown, turn the other way and just see if your opponent is actually very good at denying submissions, denying takedowns, sorry, or is he only good at denying one particular takedown type. So next takedown you should see, I'll try go for the different turning takedown, or I'll utilise the cage, or I'll utilise a different aspect, and we'll see if we have any more success. A couple of takedowns I went for was way out of range, and that's just the eagerness of trying to get the fight onto the ground. And something you can do with Hamza is chain wrestle, chain wrestle, chain wrestle. Just keep on going and going and going. And the main thing is, it's not how many attempts it takes you to get there, is once you're there, what are you going to do? And here, my opponent is of a my opponent is good, but one thing my opponent was doing was throwing with the hand that was grabbing my head, so it allowed me to posture up, so I could posture up with relative ease. And my opponent does a good job here of obviously reverse the position, and then we used the transition from getting up and then flicked held L1, which then we then flipped my opponent over and we were straight into half guard, and that transition is incredibly hard to deny. And again, that's one of the reasons that I said full guard isn't ranked as highly as some others, is because my opponent was in full guard there, and as you saw, it was very easy to reverse my opponent and have me end up back on top. But my opponent's doing his best to get up, because, you know, just going to rack up this control time. And I watched a Proaxis video the other day, and he was saying how Judge 2 scores grappling very, very heavy. So as long as I get that control time, Judge 2 could even score this a 10-8 round potentially. And this is just more of a morale breaker for my opponent, that my opponent had some success in stuffing takedowns, but when I did get my opponent to the ground, even when he reversed the position, I ended up just dominating my opponent. We didn't manage to do as much ground and pound as I'd like, as much damage, but it's a solid foundation to start the fight. And going into the next round here, I'm looking to do more of the same. And one thing to note is my stamina is in a great level. I believe my opponent should be a little bit lower. We're at probably almost full stamina, like 98%. And that's exactly where you want to be in a 5-round fight, because if it goes the full 5 rounds and you have a stamina advantage, it's ideal, because if you need to push for the finish, you can. But if you just need to play it safe, you can also do that. And one thing is, Khamzat's got very good hooks. His kicks aren't great, but I'll often throw the lead. I throw leg kicks just to mitigate my opponent's power. We go for the takedown here. My opponent sprawls, which was a very good job. We get the deny here. My opponent opts to get up, which is the smart thing to do. And against the Robert Whittaker, just because of how much power he has, I'm going to look to really utilise the leg kicks just to, like I said, mitigate some of that power, decrease Rob's power. And here I'm not sure what happened. It seemed like my controller may have died there. And my opponent's pressing me well. I'm against the fence, which is exactly where my opponent would want me to be. Of course, if you're the grappler, like me in this case, you can use that to your advantage. So you can have your back towards the fence, and then when your opponent tries a teep kick or front kick, you can rotate away, clinch, drag them to the fence, and then by doing that, you can get a pretty easy takedown and get a back sitting. So here, we're in the sprawl position, and we're just throwing some punches. I'm waiting for him to move, or I was waiting to see if he was going to use the sprawl to his advantage and anti-grapple. My opponent became impatient, tried to get up, and then it ended up with me getting into here, into the back sitting position here. And as you can see, my opponent's just he's just going through the motions. He's being very, very smart, very calculated, just trying to get up. And here he gets to his feet, and then we drag him straight back down. And this is what you've got to do. You've just, no matter how many times they get up, see here, he gets up again. We push him to the fence, and then we get him straight into back sitting. And it's just that constant flow with Hamza, you need to use him. You need to utilize him exactly how you'd use Khabib, and you just constant chain takedowns. Whenever your opponent gets up, takedown. As you see, we're denying the transitions here really well, and we could have gone for the rear naked choke and potentially ended the fight a lot earlier. But I really wanted to showcase a full breakdown using Hamza, so I wanted the fight to go on. And here we get into side control, and it's pretty evident at this point that on the ground we have an advantage. Not only that, but it's evident that my opponent's stamina levels are dropping off, and therefore the pressure is working. My opponent keeps throwing punches with the hand that's, you know, meant to be wrapped around my head, so it's giving me the easy posture up. And again, it's just putting him in trouble. However, it's obviously something that either my opponent doesn't know, or looking to bait me with. My opponent's looking to then slip a punch and then get up, which is always a threat when landing ground and pound from half guard or top mount. And as you can see, look at the stamina here again. And this is one thing, Khamzat's stamina, if you use him correctly, it can go across all 5 rounds. And this is the 3rd round now, I believe, and my stamina is in a perfect position. It's barely dropped, and we get my opponent here, and this is just beautiful. This is vintage Khamzat Chimaev. And how you do that is you catch the kick, you take them towards the cage, and normally when you get towards the cage, your character, depending on who you're using, for instance Hamza, will instantly go for the takedown, and if your opponent denies it, they'll reverse the position. So what you want to do is you want to push them to the cage, flick down on the left analog, which will then, you'll take their back, and then it instantly goes for a beautiful takedown there. And here now we're in one of my favourite positions, and once you start getting the deniers here, it's extremely hard for your opponent. It's extremely demotivating, and I don't mind, I'll let my opponent punch till he tries to move again. As you can see, my opponent's trying to bait me, does a good job there in getting out, but I knew that my back was against the fence. He was going to try to go for the get up, which is just straight up, so we denied that. And again, my opponent does a good job here. And here I'm waiting to see what my opponent's going to do. He's going to take my back, he's going to go for punches, and he opts for the punches. And again, he hasn't done too much damage. I'm not too worried. I'm alright in this position. And then he opts to get up, which is the smart thing to do, because he hasn't done much damage throughout the fight. And he needs to win this round to really be in a chance with winning the fight. But instantly we go for another takedown, because that's where we're going to have the most success. You don't really want to stand with Hamza unless it's to set up a takedown, or unless you're being forced to. And in the event that you are, utilise your jab, utilise your hooks. Like I said, kicks aren't great, but go for that lead leg. Fake takedowns here and there, just to keep your opponent thinking, because he does have power in his hands. As you can see, beautiful dodge there, get into the clinch. And yeah, utilise the clinch especially. Rotate your opponent and move them around. We get the stun there, and as you can see, my opponent has no stamina, went for a takedown, great deny from my opponent. And we're in a great position, because it's very evident that my opponent has no stamina. We've dominated the rounds we've been in so far. We've got the stun in this round, and like I said, it's just building and building, and it's just a matter of time before we finish my opponent. We managed to ankle pick my opponent there, great takedown. And here I'm just going to look to get off some deniers, drain some stamina even more. We get into the crucifix here. My opponent manages to get out and does a good job there of getting out of side saddle. And again, just going to go for these deniers, and it's going to be very tedious. It's going to be very long for my opponent. However, it's something that when you're using Hamza, this is what you've got to do. You've got to be tedious, you've got to stick on to your opponent. And you're like glue. You're not going to let them breathe. Wherever they want to transition, you're going to stop. Wherever they try to rotate to, you're going to rotate with them. And it's just the consistency that's going to end up getting you the victory. And so now into round 4, as you can see, stamina in a great place again. I know my opponent is significantly lower, and that's a huge advantage going into the 4th. We've won all 3 rounds clearly, and going into this 4th, my opponent needs to do something drastic in order to change the fight. But I know that if I need to play out the decision win now, I can look to do so. And where I have the stamina advantage, it will be, you know, fairly straightforward. My opponent's going to throw combinations, gas out, and then I can just take him down and hold the win. And as you can see, really attacking that leg. Go for a takedown here. My opponent lands an uppercut, which is very lucky not to have rocked me, so I've got to be careful. and then we land a beautiful uppercut finish. So it just shows you that Khamzat does have that power. As you can see, we didn't even end up getting the finish on the ground. It was just a beautiful uppercut finish as he was going for an overhand right. That's the video for today. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of the graph and this style of video. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. Turn on the bell so you know when I've uploaded, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.